We call it water intelligence and flood preparedness. We say monitor, alert, protect. And that's really the key, not just around the flood monitoring and flood intelligence, but really about understanding what the water is doing in whatever application it is. It could be a neighborhood that needs to understand how water's flowing through its boundaries, but it also could be, a county who is in need of understanding, the flood risks and how to solve those challenges. Simplicity integration was built because there was a need that wasn't being met. And that need was for low cost, simple systems that could be deployed quickly to help understand and gain information about water behavior. And what I'm truly proud about is that we're taking industrial hardware that is simple to maintain, simple to use, using it in this application to be able to provide our customers with a turnkey solution that is the right one for them. But in addition to that, what we really are focusing on as well is making these systems as simple as possible to utilize and to be able to interact with for our customers, making it user-friendly, in other words, and providing the level of detail that we believe an ordinary citizen would need to know in order to be flood ready, so to speak.
I'd love for you just to share what is Simplicity's mission and also what makes your approach different.
There was no turnkey solution offered to communities, offered to those who just wish to understand water behavior in their area. There are all sorts of fragmented systems that exist across our country, but none of them speak to each other. And so there's no insight that can be gained unless you look at them individually. So Simplicity exists to bring all of that to bear. And then, of course, we add the intelligence layer that Axonis is our partner with to be able to understand that information in the simplest way possible. And again, my background is in nonprofit and understanding social services and bringing together information to help people that are in need is extremely important. And that's really hard to do too. Our communities have very small budgets a lot of times, and they have to determine what things that they want, what actions they want to take in order to potentially solve for a flooding issue. And there are all different kinds of scenarios. Oh, well, we could dredge this waterway. Oh, we could expand this drainage system underground. Okay, all very expensive propositions. Well, we need to determine which one is going to be most effective at helping solve the problem that exists today, right? Where's the water coming from? How is it being dispersed through this neighborhood? And what do we need to focus on as it relates to solving that problem in a realistic, timely, and cost-effective way? That's what our customers are looking for, and that's what neighborhoods really need, that practical, low-cost solution that's really solving the problem at hand, not just throwing money at something and hoping that it's going to be the right thing to do. For our customers, they understand that generic warnings aren't enough. And what we know from some of the recent disasters in both Texas and across the globe, many times, we're inundated with information from our smartphones. And because of that, we get lots of notifications. I mean, probably while we're sitting here, we'll get 10 notifications on our phone for various reasons. But the most important are those that are about your safety. And if those are not specific enough, then people ignore them. They call it notification fatigue. We believe that we need to provide that level of specificity and be able to give the residents the ability to sign up to get alerts for a specific location that is close to them, that they care about. So the reality is that this is not a one-size-fits-all type situation, not at all. In fact, what we know about Houston, for instance, versus the Hill Country in Texas, is that Houston has soil. And so when it rains, if it hasn't rained in a while, then that soil has absorption of that rainfall. And this is something that we can track, and that there is data that exists around soil saturation. If you look at a place like the Hill Country, it's all on rock. Well, That means that there is no soil for that rainwater to go into. So it immediately is in a flash flood state. Well, that information we already have. That data set exists, but we're not putting that data set and plugging it into information about real time water levels. And of course, combining all the information from all the different sensors that are available in an area, including weather stations, to where now we can provide practical insights to our customers. When I get a generic warning that says, hey, your county has a flash flood warning. Well, my county's pretty big, right? And everybody's counties are big. And they look outside and say, well, that doesn't really pertain to me. Well, maybe it does, because things can happen rapidly, especially in areas that are prone to flash flooding, like we were talking about, that are built on rock. Well, we need to have better systems to be able to not only provide that very specific, like in your location where you are right now, this is what's going on, and you need to evacuate, and here's where you need to go. That level of specificity gets people's attention. In addition to that, the other piece that is very important is these are safety systems. So again, one of the reasons we partner with Axonis is making sure that that data and that the systems are safe.
I wanted to switch a little bit to the human impact of these systems that you're building. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. How can early warning and better coordination change outcomes for the residents and responders?
Oh, well, obviously having good information means everything. And if we have it in an ideal amount of time, then we can get people out of the way. That's the main purpose of these systems. And then putting in the redundancy in the alerting, both in ways in which we all understand, like with our cell phones, but also with sirens and audible alarms, with crossing arms and things that we want to use barriers to keep people away from dangerous situations. All of that's pretty easy. That technology just needs to be combined. And that's what we do. That's why we're called Simplicity Integration, because we're integrating the right hardware and the right solutions for the particular situation. For me, what I believe, though, is the key beyond just us being able to find the right hardware that needs to be deployed is then all of that information that comes into the cloud and having all of that data together so communities can really finally understand what's happening all the time, right? In real time. And what we're learning from the deployments that we're currently have installed and from the information that we're gaining from our platform is that we really only need to have the software. The software really gives us the information about sensors that are across the network. There are, like I said, there are many deployed. It's just really about putting that information together and then unleashing machine learning tools that are very thoughtful. And that's where Axonis and their decision intelligence software came into place. It was a no-brainer for us to want to work together.
One thing you mentioned there is, I think, when you often, talk to local government, national government, these projects seem huge. They're thinking about the people they're serving. They're then thinking about the physical infrastructure, the data, the intelligence, and then the actions on those intelligence. One thing you just mentioned kind of made something fall into place for me, which is actually all of those things already exist. Like the sensors have probably been there for a while. The data, historic data, has probably been captured, but unfortunately has been siloed away, and people aren't necessarily consuming that for predictive analytics. And even the physical hardware that may prevent someone from crossing a road, a bridge, even that hardware is there. But actually, the one thing missing is connecting those simple systems together, the integrations, and having the intelligence behind the inputs and the outputs. How are others that you're talking to, the counties, the governors, the mayors, thinking about when they need to serve their community? What does that conversation sound like?
Right. Well, and many times, in the case of Texas and then in most of the Gulf Coast, the communities are tasked with solving this challenge, and they're tasked with solving every challenge, right? public safety is obviously at the top of their list. In those cases, what we try to say is, look, you do have information coming in. You do have some intelligence on what's going on in your community. What we need to do is look for where the holes are, where are the gaps in this information. How do you think your community is going to respond to audible alerts, meaning sirens? Where would those need to go, right? And that's where we bring in experts to help us with that, to do that. But in addition to that, what other ways do we need to make sure that your community is going to get the messages? Every community responds differently, and every emergency is different. We can learn from Hurricane Harvey, we can learn from Hurricane Katrina, but the next time a big storm comes through, it's not going to behave exactly like those storms did, and thus the response is going to be different. What we have to have is a good set of real-time information and a set of alerts that are going to work for that population, because again, every population is different and every community is different. Rural versus urban. You've got all sorts of factors in between, soil saturation, all of those different factors we combine to help our communities to understand what they believe is going to be the most effective. And it's not complicated. Anybody can understand it. You don't have to be a hydrologist or an engineer, but certainly those folks can see the great opportunities that this kind of insight can provide as well for making their decisions easier. We feel like after the storm is also a really valuable place for us to be thinking. What happens next after a storm goes through, and those who are going to respond to that disaster, they need to know where to start. And many times there is really no information about where to start, and they just literally go into the community and try to figure it out as they go, and that takes time. So our goal is always to reduce the time in which the right information, is in front of the people who need it the most, right? And that includes afterwards. And that's where my background in nonprofit food security and using artificial intelligence and machine learning to help us understand the situation on the ground as it relates to vulnerable populations and how that our systems are responding to that. All of that information is valuable in disaster recovery. So we believe the next phase for our decision intelligence platform will really be to be a disaster response tools that can lay over our flood and real-time flood and water monitoring, water intelligence system. Once you layer in good information, you can start to see a picture that you can't see if you're looking at all of them separately. If we need to know where healthy food access is limited, if we need to understand where health disparities are run deep, and where our vulnerable seniors are living, we can layer all that information over with flood information and where power outages are. All of that gives us a sense for where we need to start. Where do our disaster recovery teams need to start? And that's going to be the next step for our decision intelligence partnership with Axonis. And we're really excited about that piece. It's not about AI, it's about insights. And we can gain insights from information. And that information has been collected over decades and decades in our country. Why are we not bringing all of that together and harnessing that to make good decisions based on that data and based on historic perspective? So we appreciate the fact that we get to work with Axonis in this, and we look forward to the partnership and all that we'll do together in the future.